call a meeting to order of the November 2nd meeting of the Transportation, Mobility, and Infrastructure Commission. To do roll call, I forget. She's not there. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Commissioner Wetzel. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Commissioner Wetzel. Item 1A, presentation by the public on matters not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of the Commission. The Commission is prohibited by law from discussing issues not on the agenda brought to them at this time. Anyone wishing to fill out, or anyone wishing to address the Commission or on any agenda item should fill out the request to speak form and present it to the clerk prior to the completion of the staff presentation. So moving on to item 1B, Commission Communications. Anything anyone wants to bring up at this time? Okay. Moving on to the consent agenda. The number of meeting minutes here to move for approval.
So move.
Have a motion.
Second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion items? Call for a vote then. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Great, motion passes. Moving on to the regular agenda, item 5, consideration of resolution 15-2, establishing the date, time, and location for meetings of the West Sacramento Transportation, Mobility, and Infrastructure Commission.
Well, we have the schedule in front of us, or you may have, that the meeting schedule will be, it's only altered for the holidays for January, January 4th, July 4th, and September 5th. And so we're going to change those dates to the following Monday, January 11th, July 11th, and September 12th due to the holidays, New Year's, Independence Day, and Labor Day. So if that's okay with the commissioners, we can take a vote on that.
Any comments or questions?
Are there a number of meetings that we are allowed to miss? Because there's at least one on that schedule that I can't make.
Yeah, you're allowed to miss 3 times. Oh, that's fine.
Any other questions or concerns on the meeting schedule for next year? Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion
Second.
Okay.
moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Next up on the agenda is item 6, update on General Plan 2035.
Evening, Commission. I'm Justin Hardy, the Senior Planner. I am sitting in for David Tilley, who's can't be with us today.
Is your mic on?
It's on. The General Plan outline was bulleted of several key points along the ways. Noted, I did see that the Planning Department did come before you with some updates last April regarding mobility and prelim traffic findings as well. Some of the more notable things towards the end is the NOP went out and we held 2 scoping meetings and had attendance at both of those meetings. Most of them were questions related to one of the projects, Liberty, which is adjacent to some of the Village Parkway project. So we've been dealing with some of those questions. We plan to have the admin draft in January out for circulation. As of now, if you were familiar with the alternative analysis for Liberty, as was going to be part of the general plan, they have since been pivoted out of the general plan, and they will be on their own timeline, and the general plan will move forward with the timeline we're looking for, and that's the admin draft in January. We're continuing to work with ICF to pull any last-minute details together, but the general plan itself is moving along, and once it's on its own and no alternative, it should move even quicker along the way. I didn't know if there was any question that the commission had.
I have you said on the status of the update, there's 3 tasks: the policy document update, the general plan background report, and then the EIR. So when you say January 2016, is that the admin draft of the policy document? Or what are we actually getting?
It would be the admin draft of the general plan.
Which I take as the first task, the policy document, and I guess the background report. Do those 2 things go together? Or? I'm just trying to understand, related to your task list, what we can expect as far as an admin draft.
Both of those, I believe, I know the background report is done. Pretty well wrapped up, so in the event that they weren't going to follow together, I could certainly make sure that you are aware of that.
Okay, and then I know we're the mobility.
Any other comments or questions on this agenda item? Okay. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item number 7, update on the City of West Sacramento's residential traffic calming program.
All right. Good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Commission Chair, members of the Commission, my name is Peter Hansen. I'm an engineering assistant with the transportation section. I can speak up a little bit. And I was asked to do a presentation for you on the update of our residential traffic calming program. And I did have a PowerPoint presentation somewhere. No? PowerPoint? Yes, please. So we have something to look at too. Okay.
Or play Angry Birds. Yeah, it's all right.
But was the lighting adequate?
Check.
Microphone check one.
Yeah?
She just came from dance class, so. Yeah.
Yeah, because I started, the recording seems to work. Okay, let me just check. Okay. Okay.
We ready? We're ready
Can't
to
hear anything, but.
resume our commission meeting this time. Thank you.
Jennifer, do you mind? So, first, a little bit of a history about our residential traffic calming program. It was adopted by council in 1998 to address neighborhood adversely affected by excessive vehicle speeds and cut-through traffic. That was the idea. Particularly important is that it is designed as a cooperative effort between residents and city staff. It was then revised in 2005 and again in 2007 to its current form. Well, this thing is very long. So far, 14 neighborhoods successfully participated in the program, but during the 2008 budget, the program has, the funding has been reallocated and effectively suspended the program. So just a little bit of an idea of what the criteria is to participate in the program or for a neighborhood to participate in the program. It starts with a petition that's being submitted to staff, signed by a minimum of 10 residents or 10 households. After that, we evaluate whether or not the street qualifies. So there's some qualifiers that are in place, which is that it needs to be a 2-lane residential street or collector with a posted speed of 25 miles an hour. There needs to be a speeding problem that we validate through a radar survey showing that there's, the speed is 6 miles per hour over the 85th percentile. At that point, if city determines whether or not we do also some traffic counts, and we evaluate whether or not there's a significant amount of cut-through traffic, and then there has to be between 500 and 25 vehicles per day on the street. If there's not enough, there's obviously not enough traffic really going through there, and if it's more, then possibly traffic needs to go through there. And we also evaluate how many collisions occurred on that segment, so we get a good picture of what basically the street, particularly the main street, looks like, but we will focus on the whole area. So the approach to traffic calming is in our residential traffic calming program, but this is just, it gives you a short overview how the whole thing works. So basically residents submit their petition, they've been put on a priority list that we used to work off first come, first served. When they've been selected, we have a huge kickoff meeting, and during that kickoff meeting, explain what traffic calming is to the residents, and we solicit residents to participate as a working group. That working group, we inform them then about the 3 E's: education, enforcement, and engineering, the tools that are basically in place to address traffic calming and traffic concerns in streets. That group creates a plan that, with our help, with staff help, basically it's a partnership, and that plan is being brought forth to the whole neighborhood again, so they can review it and they can comment on it, and modifications are being made, and after that it goes off to a ballot process of the affected residents that live there. We require that a minimum return of the ballots that we send out, that we get 15% back, identifying that there's enough of an interest of the residents, not just to select a group, and of those 60% need to be in favor. That's what we have done, and we have done it in 14, after that we installed devices, and we basically did that so far successfully in 14 neighborhoods. So it has worked really well, and we streamlined it pretty good, that within a few months we had a program in place that we could go with. Hold on, here we go. As mentioned, the program has been suspended at this point, or paused. We still have encouraged residents to submit the petition just in case the program gets started again, funding becomes available, so that we can work off that first come, first served list. And at this point, we're working on the 2 E's that are left to us, which is pretty much education about what is available to the residents, what can they do, and that leads really normally to enforcement, that we can still get our police enforcement to do selective enforcement in those areas. We're also right now in the process or considering to ask actually council to reallocate some funding for the program, and we will do that in the next budget round. So once funding would become available again, which we hope, we first would have to update the program or reevaluate it. It has been, since 2007, since we last looked at it, and basically look to see if it's still up to date or if there's changes. We're not the only community that is traffic calming, and there has been advances made possibly. We then, all the petitions that we receive, we evaluate for the validity of the criteria that I mentioned earlier. We have stopped doing that because it's at this point just resources we would spend on it. We would have to take that up again. Since 2007, our police department has actually approached us and voiced some concerns about speed bumps. Prior, they were okay with it. I mean, we involved police and fire in the plan that we're developing to make sure that they're okay with it. But now they're pointed to us that they're not happy with speed bumps at all. And they had some design suggestions that, in our opinion, really made the whole speed bump mute. So that would have to be looked at to see if there's something that we can work out, that we find a device that possibly could work as a speed bump. And after that, we pretty much would resume the program on a first-come, first-served basis. That's it. Any questions?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. First of all, thank you for the presentation. Really appreciate it. You were speaking occasionally as if this were a current program, but it looks as if this were suspended 7 years ago, right, in 2008 because of lack of funding?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you're looking to reestablish the program?
Right. Basically, we're looking into see whether council wants to allocate some funding to the program.
Got it, okay. Yeah.
If I could clarify something.
Sure.
Right. If I could clarify, the program was suspended back in 2008, but that hasn't stopped the Public Works Department from collecting the petitions. If the residents, it's still on our website, the petition and the 2007 update of the traffic calming program. So folks can still download that, they can still review the criteria, they can still hold private neighborhood meetings, and they can get a petition submitted to Public Works. There's two things that were updated recently. Well, recently it was 2007, the second update, and that is private installation or private funding for installation of traffic calming. So if a neighborhood, for instance, should decide that they want to move forward with private funding of speed bumps or whatever traffic calming it is that they're suggesting, if they're paying for staff time on top of that, we would be able to go through the process and evaluate the neighborhood just as we normally would if the program was funded. That has been done. There was a neighborhood that did that. That was on Lighthouse Drive. And so we went through the entire process. It was a privately funded endeavor, and we successfully got that evaluated. Turned out that they did meet the criteria, and those were installed. So right now, for any non-funded projects, we are still taking petitions, and we've got a list of petitions. As you probably guess, a number of people have said, well, we need traffic calming in our neighborhood pretty much throughout the entire city. People have said that on a number of streets. A handful have gotten petitions in, and we're at a point where it's been, we've gone through the economic downturn. We're going to be requesting additional funding for this program. When that gets kicked off, we're going to start going through from the top of the list down, and as funding is available, we'll do what we can to implement this. But it's going to depend on the amount of funding that's allocated by our city council and what kind of traffic calming is necessary in these neighborhoods, if any, because 99% of the time it's not needed. It's a perception issue.
Well, if I may, a couple of points to address there. First of all, if you're only allowing for communities who can afford to go through the process, that does raise some equity concerns immediately for me. And so as funding becomes available, I highly recommend that you address any equity provisions that have come along with that, because I know there are a number of neighborhoods here who simply could not afford the time nor the money to go through such a process. Second, if there is such a large volume of residents, the purpose of our transportation infrastructure in the city is to provide for our residents. And if our residents have this large perception that traffic is not working for them in their communities, then we probably should be a little more open to understanding that perception can be a problem as well, and it's something we need to address. And it may just mean that what communities want are safer streets with cars that are going slower, even if there are fewer cars. And if that were to occur, if that were to happen, if we were to create those conditions for them, then they would use those streets more in other modes, and we would encourage mode shift to biking and walking, for example. It could be that people, because of perception of safety, aren't using those modes, and then that's creating a feedback loop that causes worse traffic on those streets and in neighboring streets. So if we were to address the perception through some traffic calming devices that, again, that I'm glad you mentioned it, that weren't even necessarily speed bumps, but were other types of measures, that you could at the same time address the perception problem. It does go to even just the side conversation we were having about lighting and other issues like that. These are there are a number of ways you can address and use TDMs for traffic calming. And if that's our goal, I really think we should consider in this program addressing people's perceptions of what should be a safe street, and trying to address it, trying to create those kinds of conditions so that their perceptions are changed. Because if they're perceiving an unsafe place, then they're not going to be using the streets in the same manner. It also goes to just another question I have here, that you have major changes summarized below. My question is, are you asking us to, is there a movement, are we moving some kind of changes to this program in this particular meeting?
We're going to be, as I said, in the next budget cycle, which will be spring next year, recommending that we provide some funding into this program. The Commission is more than welcome to provide some recommendations to make changes to this program. It is a policy document, so we provided the policy document for you to review. If the Commission does have suggested changes, such as adopting a citywide transportation perception addressing policy, along with a recommended budget for us to take to council to ask for that funding for these different programs or different implementations, then we're happy to bring that up at that time during the budget cycle.
Yeah, no, what I mentioned about perception is that you need to address perception as one of the criteria, and to just blow people off because of their, what may look like an illusory concern for fear or safety. There may be some, something real happening there, and they live those neighborhoods, 24 hours a day, right? They're in their neighborhoods a lot more frequently than we are. So that's what I meant by that, by just, make sure we're not just brushing them off because, oh, well, the count on the road only showed that there were 440 cars going down that street instead of 500 cars, so they don't meet our quantification for eligibility, that kind of stuff. So just making sure that we're addressing that as well, because perception impacts behavior. And if we want positive behavior for the city, that includes addressing perception. For the major changes summarized below on page 2 here, you have eligibility. That eligibility change doesn't really take into account changes in need over time. And so if you're going to recommend some kind of quantifiable eligibility requirement, you also need to have in place monitoring to ensure that eligibility is up to date and it's actually addressing the problems on the ground. So I know monitoring can be expensive as well, but if you don't have it, then you end up with an obsolete or even at times a ridiculous program that looks like it's completely out of tune with what's going on in the neighborhood. So ensure that you're updating and monitoring effectively when you have quantifiable eligibility. Overall, I like the program. I like the concept. I think the concept of outreach and encouraging a positive interaction with the neighborhood is absolutely, of prime importance, and I really love that this is focused on that. Would like you to consider the potential for a cart and horse problem, which is some of these communities' behaviors have been affected over decades by the type of infrastructure that's been available to them. And so they don't, for example, bike or walk down certain streets because they never could for safety concerns. So then when you go and do a number count, you don't see anybody using it, and that gives you bad information on the back end, because our infrastructure, the infrastructure we develop, actually affects that behavior. So you have to figure out which way are you going. Are you trying to address just a problem, or are you really trying to create a condition where people will use facilities? So I encourage that you consider that you're not just always coming in to try to fix a problem, but that you're coming in to a community trying to create the infrastructure that would encourage the kinds of behavior that people want in that neighborhood. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on Joshua's comment about the changing nature of the traffic situation and monitoring that. A good example, that's the new arena downtown, when that goes in next year. I suspect that'll have some radical changes, at least on our side of the river, depending upon how the neighborhood, what do they call it, neighborhood parking program is administered. So I think that might be an example of something that's going to affect us outside our jurisdiction, and we should monitor that. In terms of the impacts on our neighborhood, one of the questions I had, or something that you might add to your eligibility, is what is a neighborhood? Is there a size definition of a neighborhood in terms of like 1 block, 5 blocks, 10 blocks? How large or small of an area do you need to organize to kind of come up with some ideas for this?
So what we have normally done is we actually ask the residents as what they identify as their neighborhood, and we work in a group. We don't just pick a street. We do take a whole neighborhood and to see if there's any impacts that overflow that can, just pushing the problem down one street is not really going to help. So yeah, we do try to encompass it, and so we have addressed really neighborhoods, not just streets.
Large enough area, basically, where you can implement the measures and so forth. And then another thought is some of the physical measures may relate to the previous item, the traffic mobility infrastructure element, to the extent that we're establishing traffic circles within the city or roundabouts that are physical improvements. Seems to me that dovetails with the policy of the general plan and any identification of locations. And then maybe that in turn will help us with funding, I don't know, but to the extent that we have a policy document that establishes infrastructure and circulation improvements, that might be the basis for some additional funding for those items. So I don't know whether you've kind of thought about that integration between those two, but that might be helpful.
We actually have. So when we bring, sit together with the neighborhoods and develop the plan, and and we basically have a toolbox, and I probably should have provided that. And it has a whole range of things from just signs and striping to traffic circles, road closures, the whole gamut, and whatever else they can think of. And we encourage them to think outside of the box and to come up with ideas. If there are higher ticket prices, like a traffic circle, then they would have to be roped into the CMP program and couldn't be funded out of the same pool of money. And so far it hasn't happened, but yes, it's definitely something we have on the table too. There's no stops for it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Wetzel?
Since this, we're at like 8 years of program suspension. In the meantime, if you guys have noted that requests have been coming in, but in those 8 years, there's been a lot of changes to the city. So I think it's also important that while those projects have been they're first come, first served. Some of those requests may be 8 years old and obsolete. So it's important that, as you're reviewing these, if there is funding available again, that maybe go back to the residents who submitted the petition to begin with and say if their request is still valid, or if the requesters are even there anymore. There's a lot of things that have been happening. So I would just say that. Also, the report that the 2005 report showed some successes, but we keep on referring to 14 projects. It'd be nice to see what those projects were, especially since that report is 10 years old. So I'd like to kind of see examples of those successes that's a little bit newer than a 10-year-old report.
Last questions and comments. So you mentioned earlier there are petitions that are stacked up. Do we have any idea? Is it 10, 100, 500? There's 9. Okay. Some comments on the plan. I like the the grassroots collaborative kind of approach. My concerns kind of revolved around what are the affected neighborhoods? How are those defined? You mentioned a little bit how that was determined, but really be interested in understanding that a little bit more, and how it can vary from one situation to another. And it's part of the criteria for voting is that you're an affected neighbor, and how that's determined. I have a little bit of concern with the voting criteria as far as, how likely is it to get 15% back of ballots that are mailed out? How often? Do we have any data on that? Okay. Okay. Great. That's all I have. Any other further comments? Thank you very much for your report. Thanks for your time. Moving on to item number 9, General Administration Function, Part 2, 9A, Commission Calendar. Our next meeting is on, forgive me if I don't have that date here, January 11th. Thank you, Jennifer. Any reports from city staff, item B?
No reports.
Okay. Future item requests for the commission, for future commission meetings?
Yeah, I'd like an update on the bicycle master plan.
Anything else? Okay. And with that, the meeting is complete.
I do need confirmation for the
Okay.
Do you need a motion to that effect, or just?
Okay. I move that we get an update on the bicycle master plan.
I second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.